Hi, I'm Mike, owner of the Ingram in Phoenix, Arizona, and today I'm going to talk to you about the new Rhino high fidelity box set of The Doors' first 6 studio albums. I have actually had this about a week. I want to say I probably put about 20 plays on each disc. It's been insane. I played them relentlessly. Multiple times. If you came into the store throughout the weekend, except for, of course, Record Store Day when we were streaming copyright-free classical music, you probably heard these Rhino hi-fis. I've heard them at the house. I've heard them here mostly all day on my day off. I've put a lot of plays on these, but I wanted to do that to kind of compare this box set against the 45 RPM Analog Productions box that I have right there. But I also wanted to compare a couple of albums, namely the first album, self-titled, and LA Woman, against my top choice in my Shootout video. Now, I haven't done a Shootout of the other 4 albums in this box set, but I have done one for the self-titled and for LA Woman. So I was essentially looking to just compare Shootout winner, 45 RPM Analog Productions in the case of LA Woman, to the Rhino Hi-Fi, and the self-titled, comparing that to the first pressing Stereo Monarch, which is the Shootout winner for me of that album. Now, you've probably seen people talk and show these albums. I'll do it briefly. Their fit and finish on these things is fantastic. If you look at the two side by side, hopefully there's not much glare here with the plastic inner sleeves that I have up, but I've got the Analog Productions here and the Rhino Hi-Fi here. You could see both big, thick, luscious tip-on jackets, fantastic production. Keep in mind the Analog Productions is 45 RPM. The Rhino Hi-Fi is 33 RPM. The Rhino box set was cut by the legendary Kevin Gray, and the 45 RPM was cut by the legendary Doug Sax, who, though, has since passed. So, as a whole, I'm going to tell you what I think about the albums. I'm also going to tell you why I think the result is what it is. I started with the first album. Now, the first album was very difficult because the Monarch is a beast. It is really, really good. This is my first US Monarch pressing. I showed this in the video I did of the Shootout. Very, very difficult album to go against. That record, when I did my original Shootout, just slayed the competition. It was that good. I will say, when I compared that, the Monarch against this, I was a little worried on the first track because as I was going back and forth, I did track for track. I did break on through on both sides, both discs. I preferred the Monarch. There's a compression on the original. The whole album has compression to it. You can just hear it. There's a compression on it, and that worked for break on through. And I think to this day, my favorite version of this record, or break on through, is actually on the Monarch first pressing. But I will say the rest of the album, I prefer the Rhino Hi-Fi. Now, the Rhino Hi-Fi is actually made from a first generation safety copy of the original master tape. A first generation safety copy means that they took the original master tape and they made a 1-for-1 copy. What's kind of cool with all of these, although this is a little goofy on this particular album, is they actually include photographs of the original master tape. And I studied these things through and through. One thing that's really bizarre, here we have the master for the safety, and it actually mentions on here, dated 07. This is the only living master in good condition. I noticed, and I actually talked to Kevin about this, some of these boxes kind of disintegrated over time, and we have new outer boxes. Some original boxes exist, like the LA Woman master tape box exists. But the notes on this are fantastic. There's just so much to be learned from these boxes. But one of the most goofy things they did is actually have the safety copy of side, what is this, side B? Now, in a lot of cases, they have both reels A and B combined, if you look at these tape boxes. But they actually put the mono box on the back. So we have the mono box on the back and the stereo box on the front. There is no mono in this box set. This is just a stereo box set. That is just a goof from Rhino Hi-Fi. And that actually might be a goof. Who knows? That gets corrected at some point. They have... I'm under the impression, and I don't know if they've talked about this publicly, but I am under the impression that these are going to be made in great quantity at standard, for standard individual releases. I cannot see them not doing that for the doors. They did it for Black Sabbath in a way that Black Sabbath was a little goofy. So what they did with the Black Sabbath is they did a numbered edition, followed by an unnumbered edition, which had a different barcode. And then they did a Rocktober for brick and mortar independent record stores. Same exact thing, but just a third barcode applied over the jacket, over the Obi strip that you see right here. So really bizarre, but I have a feeling you're not going to drag the Doors master tapes out to just do 3,000 copies, sell out in 24 hours, and then just, I'm done. I've got enough money. As a company, we don't need any more money. We're done. We're not going to do anything. That's not going to happen. They're going to keep these puppies in print, as they've done pretty much for all of the Rhino Hi-Fis, except for that first Cars album, which, who knows, that might come back to life. And I feel like that'll come out as a Start Your Year Off title, or I don't think we've seen the last of that. But that and the television, hard to get. But the rest of the stuff, easy to get. Multiple pressings of some. Okay, so I'm going to give you my rundown. As a whole, I'll skip to the chase. I prefer the Rhino Hi-Fi box over the Analog Productions box. But let me go into great detail because I spent so much time with these. So for the Doors' self-titled album, Break On Through is the best on the Monarch. The 45 RPM of this doesn't compare with either of these. But the 45 RPM, or the Break On Through on the Monarch is the best. I like the compression, me personally, how it works. Every other track on the album, I prefer the Rhino Hi-Fi. The thing that I discovered with this, and I went back and forth with Kevin on the phone on this, and I talked to him about it at great detail, because one of the things I noticed about this box set, and it's just because of my knowledge with the Doors, the instruments they use, and I've talked about this on previous videos. His system has the most realistic sound of those instruments I've ever heard. And I thought about it a little more. I think that's just Kevin's system. I really don't. It's not that Kevin is turning the knobs on the mastering console in some special way. He gets a lot of credit for being a great mastering engineer, and he is. But what he doesn't get talked about enough about is the construction and the designing of the system that he uses to actually master these records. And that is, in itself, I think, the magic secret sauce of what we're hearing. The same thing happened with the Music Matters 45 RPMs versus the 33s that he later cut. Everybody, for the most part, is pretty unanimous that they prefer the sound of the 33s with his much improved system as opposed to the 45s, both cut from the same exact tape, just done quite a bit later with a different system. His system, I think, reproduces what is on the tape, not just with the Doors, but with anybody, better than anybody else's system. It just has the most detail. It doesn't, the top end of brass instruments, whether it's John Densmore's drums or when he's doing a jazz release, when you're talking about one of these Blue Notes, the instruments don't break up. They have such a lifelike and organic, brassy text, there's so much texture to the actual sound, like an instrument in your living room. And his system is what's doing it. And that's just the way he's designed it. And I talked about it with him, and he's talked about it previously, how he's got a all Class A system. And he's gone into detail. I'm not going to go back over that. You can go online and you can find out about his system, but that is really, I think, the magic sauce in this particular box set and many other things he does. And like I say, I'm very familiar with it because favorite band of all time. I've made no bones. I mean, I've not kept that a secret. The Doors by far my favorite band. LA Woman is by far and away my favorite album of all time. I won't say by far and away. It's my favorite album of all time. There's others that I think that are up there with it. Art Blakey's Moanin', Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon. But for me, The Doors, LA Woman is my favorite album. But growing up, I mean, Robbie's SG, I had a Fender Rhodes piano bass. I had an English-made Vox Continental, a Gibson G101. I've had these instruments. I've played them. I eventually realized that I was a horrible musician, but while I was plucking away on those instruments for years, the sound of them, these original transistor organs, that SG, is just baked into my mind. I just know how they're supposed to sound. You know, when you hear a drummer playing a ride cymbal, you know, like John Densmore on LA Woman, just that. When you hear that, it has a sound that is very specific. I don't have any other way to describe it. And what you hear on the Rhino Hi-Fi is the closest approximation of those sounds on vinyl. That's all I can say. Now, there are different choices that are made along the route that can kind of change your opinion and how you feel about things. 45 RPMs definitely have an advantage. Using the compression on Break On Through gives it a more grunty, visceral feel. And I kind of preferred that. But you hear more of everything, even though it's a safety tape. It's not a first generation master. But the advances in technology, the system that he has put together, even being a safety, this sounds absolutely fantastic. Hands down. So I will say another thing as I talk about these albums on this video is don't go run out and buy this box set, please. People are asking $1,000 bucks, $500, $600, $700, $800. It's a $249.99 box set. The only thing you get with this box set that you do not get if these come out individually is you get this snakeskin box. Beautiful box. What I pay an extra $200 for this box, it is numbered. And then all the albums are going to be numbered. They did a great job with the album numbering as well. The actual numbering of the albums is all a different color, and it kind of corresponds with the album jacket. It's cool, but who the hell cares? It doesn't change the sound. Okay, so my preferred overall, like I said, I'm not going to just, if I'm going to pull an album, I generally pull what I feel is my number one choice. I'm not going to pull out the Monarch, listen to Break On Through, and then flip over to the Rhino Hi-Fi. As a whole, the Rhino Hi-Fi is better. I'm going to listen to the Rhino Hi-Fi. It is my preferred version at this point of this album. Maybe in the future I'll do a detailed analysis of some of these other records. Now, when it came to Strange Days and some of these other albums, I've never done an in-depth shootout. But what I did do is Strange Days, Rhino Hi-Fi versus the 45 RPM. I preferred the Rhino Hi-Fi. Some albums were closer. Some albums were monumentally better. One of the albums that I thought that was just like mind-boggling good compared to the analog productions was Waiting for the Sun. This puppy is absolutely smoking. Fantastic. Really, really good. One of the things that was weird, so like I told you, they all include master tape photographs. This is bizarre to me, and I would love to get some answers on this, but if you look at the tape box, now this is one of those tape boxes where they took reels A and B and they combined them, if you look at that. But what's weird is it actually says, Danger Will Robinson, we could be so good together, bar 7, beat 4, 2, beat 8, bad stretch, dead. And that's dated 5/14/07. But it says it was transferred to 92-bit, 24-bit vinyl for the 40th anniversary remaster. But they transferred it, they would have transferred the stretch. But on 6/28 of this year, Kevin Gray fixed it. Really bizarre. I want to know how it was fixed. We don't know how it was fixed. But I also don't know how they fixed the Analog Productions version of it. This was done in 2012. So that's kind of got me, that's got my inner Columbo wondering what the hell happened. Now, on the reel itself, it says transferred 514.07 to 24-bit 192. That matches up with the front. But yeah, it mentions there's a stretch in there. And again, there's a picture of the box, which this is not the original box. They would have been combined at some point along the lines, right? We don't know exactly when. It also looks like it was done there was another digital transfer done 1/19/18. I don't really know. Really interesting. I'd like to have details on how that was done and how the Analog Productions was done. If the master tape was damaged going back to 2007. But fantastic. Waiting for the Sun. Home run with the Rhino Hi-Fi. Another home run for me was the Doors Soft Parade. Their least popular album, one of my favorite Doors albums, mainly because the Soft Parade title, the title track is just absolutely fantastic. I fell in love with that song. They did a live TV performance kind of towards the end of the band, Bearded Out Jim, and I just remember watching that as a kid on an old VHS tape, and I always just fell in love with the Soft Parade as a song. Actually, let me show you, too, what I'm talking about. Yeah, like this is a silver foiling. They're all different color foilings. But one of the things I will say, too, that I wasn't nuts about with the box set is you're probably not going to be able to tell that there. The numbering caused these jackets to be handled quite a bit more than probably they normally would have been, and that causes like scratching and scuffing on them. I think if they do individual versions of this, we're not going to have that issue. Right? Obi. Actually, let's pull out the master tape box. Oh, I had it at the back the whole time. Same thing. This is a combined reel. Very cool. So combined in 1987. One of the things that was done, too, when you look at all the master tapes, they were mostly signed by, I think maybe all the combined reels were actually signed by Bruce Botnick and Paul Rothchild. Like they autographed the actual reel and they autographed the box so nobody could do any kind of like funny business. Like I guess theoretically you could take the tape. You can't autograph the actual magnetic tape, but you can actually see. So cool. As a huge Doors fan, just looking at these was fantastic. Reel 1, first generation Dolby original mixes. 1985 review of masters. It actually puts the title track on here for Reel A and Reel B, and it actually, in pen, says first generation. And then I guess to kind of put the authoritative stamp on it, you've got Bruce and Paul signing the box, stating, yes, this indeed is the first generation master tape. Morrison Hotel. Again, I preferred Soft Parade over the Analog Productions 45 RPM, and I prefer Morrison Hotel. They are just, as a whole, better. Now, there are instances where the 45 starts to shine. If you get a track that runs really, really long when you get towards the very edge, towards the label, then you start getting, degradation in sound, which is very common with 33s. The 45s start to shine in that regard because now you're spreading all that information against a big piece of wax, nowhere near the inner groove. So there's tracks and there's segments of these that get better on the Analog Productions 45 RPM, but I had to go as a whole. Now, again, this is my favorite band of all time. If the juice is worth the squeeze and the 45 RPM is better as a whole, that's what I'm going to listen to. I'm not going to go back and forth. But it's funny because I talk about 45 RPMs and I say to you guys all the time, If they're significantly better, I'll listen to that over a 33 because I prefer the 33. It's easier. I don't have to break it up by getting up twice as much. It's, my brain is in tune with how the album's supposed to lay out when I'm waiting for that third or fourth track to kick in, and it doesn't because I have to get up and flip it. My brain just kind of it's a little jarring almost. So all things being equal, I'm going to generally go with a 33. But when it gets to a sound advantage, especially a big one, the 45 RPM for me is the way to go. And is saying as much when it comes to LA Woman. I don't think I've listened to another copy of LA Woman in like 10 years because this for me has just been such a huge just advantage over anything else. I just have not wanted to waste my time. Like anytime I heard anything else, it was like, oh, nope, I got to go listen to the Analog Productions at 45 RPM because this sucks. This is not as good. And my brain was just like, no, you're listening to the wrong version, Mike. But this 33 of LA Woman, now this is the album I listen to by far and away the most. A, it's my favorite album. B, I was there for the mastering session. I did a specific video on that and talked about it a little bit. My initials are actually in the dead wax of this. Not that I'm going to let that taint my opinion on this. Although you guys might not trust my opinion because of it, but I don't know what to tell you. Original tape box here, by the way. I actually put a picture of me holding these very tape boxes on the store's Instagram and Facebook page. But as a whole, I actually prefer the Rhino High Fidelity series. It is across the board better. Although when it comes to this album, the 45 RPM I think is the closest to the Rhino High Fidelity. And you get into that situation where like the tail end of Riders on the Storm and the tail end of LA Woman, it starts to become apparent that the 45 has a huge advantage. But when it comes to the instruments, the texture of the instruments, the texture of the drum kit, Ray Manzarek's organ, the tech piano more than anything. He plays a tech piano on Love Her Madly, and it has a plucky sound to it. The tech piano on the Rhino Hi-Fi versus the Analog Productions is fantastic. It has such such definition to the actual piano itself. But it starts to stuffer when you get to the very tail end of Riders on the Storm and LA Woman, because this is an album that actually runs pretty long. When I was there with Kevin and he was doing the mastering on this, and he was doing essentially like a rundown, he called it, I guess in official mastering lingo, but he's doing a rundown to make sure everything is ready to go. The lathe is going to cut it, all his equalization, all of that is ready to go. And he did almost no equalization on this album. He pretty much laid down a flat, very close to a flat. There was some, but very close to a flat transfer of what was on the tape. But this actually had to be turned down a half dB. And the reason it had to be turned down a half dB is because the album ran so damn long, there would have been no dead wax. You'd have been cutting on the label. So the one thing I will say is with the Rhino Hi-Fi, you got to turn it up a little bit. One of the ways you could have avoided that is you could have added compression in mastering, but audiophiles don't want that. I would think most listeners of music, for the most part, don't want that. Although, ironically enough, I just said that I preferred it on Break On Through, but that was the only track. I thought it worked for Break On Through. But you have to turn it up a little bit. No problem. I got a volume knob on my receiver. You probably have one on yours too. But you turn it up a little bit, and all things being equal, not only do I prefer the sound of the Rhino Hi-Fi on the Doris LA Woman, but again, everything sounds so much more realistic, so much more lifelike. The tech piano, the Vox Continental, you can hear, transistor organ just has such a ear-piercing, screeching sound to it. And it's there, man. It's there on the Rhino Hi-Fi. Fantastic. This box set is fantastic. I really, truly hope Rhino puts these things into print and puts them into print like in huge quantities. I hope it's not relegated to a Rhino Hi-Fi exclusive, because that essentially means that the average customer coming in, shopping, just digging the bins at your local record store is going to pick up the Bernie Grundman reissues from, when was that? The 2008 box. Essentially, it's the breakup from the 2008 box, and they don't hold a candle to like any of these. Those things suck. I've never been a fan of those. Those things are like compression, and it's just boo. They're $25. They're a lot more affordable than these at $40. But I think if we put some of these things in the bin at the record store, people are going to look at this big luxe, beautiful jacket, and they're going to be like, wow, this thing looks, ooh, look at this. Look, cut from the tape. It's got the beautiful, obi, limited edition, heavyweight. I mean, it's just like, I think you're going to spring for the extra $15. And when they get it home, their mind's going to blow. They're going to be like, holy shite, this is amazing. Let me go buy the rest of these things. But if they're just sitting with those Bernie Grundman cuts, that's not going to be the same kind of experience. And what's cool about that is that's how we get future audiophiles, guys, is you blow their mind. Once they hear something that can't be unheard, they want to know why. Why has this LA woman, why does this sound like no LA woman I've ever heard in my entire life? Why is it? And then they come back into the record store, they go on to the Reddit form, and they ask themselves this question, and then they come back to the in-groove, and I'm like, well, that's because this was done this way with this, and I give them the speech. And then they say, well, what other records are done that way? And then I'm like, oh, check out all of these. And then you have future vinyl audiophile customers for lifetime, because it cannot be unheard. It cannot be undone. And this box set is absolutely fantastic. I didn't know how I didn't know how to go about this, because I'm getting to the point now where, first of all, my initials are on the dead wax of LA Woman. So it's like, I didn't make the damn record. I was just holding down the producer chair from floating away, in case there was gravitational shifts in the earth, to where something might float. I was on top of it. Of course, I guess I would have floated with it. But you get the drift. It's not like I did anything. Kevin was nice enough. I was there. He put my initials in the dead wax. But how do I approach this? People are like, oh, all you do is talk how great everything Kevin does and everything Kevin this and Kevin is. Yeah, but that's not because I just say these things. That's just because what it is. And tell me I'm wrong. Give me the for instance to where I'm wrong. And more times than not, especially with his new coherent system, it's just good. And you just can't deny it. You put, there's been cases where we've had some duplication. Bernie Grundman, for instance, did a Vinyl Me Please box set, and then Kevin Gray has gone back and done some of those titles, and they're better. I think everybody just agrees, listening to one versus the other, they're better. Kevin's are better. And, I truly think that's the case here. I'm not disappointed in owning this 45 RPM box. This has given me just absolute joy for 12 years. Came out in 2012. Here we are at the tail end of 2024. I've gotten this box when it came out was, I feel like it might have been less than $400, but let me see. Maybe it was $400 when it came out, but I'm telling you, I got every bit of my money's worth out of this box. I played the absolute snot out of these records. I have sold so many systems, made videos, talked about it. I absolutely have adored this Analog Productions 45 RPM box. But except for the LA Woman, and except on some rare occasions, I'm going to package it all back up into the outer box, and I'm going to shelf it. I'll never get rid of it. But the Rhino Hi-Fi is just that good. And it's 33. I mentioned that, right? It's 33 RPM, which is, I guess I could theoretically get the exercise. I should be getting up a little more to change over records, but my brain likes it all on one side. And unless it hurts my ears, my brain wins. But, man, this Rhino Hi-Fi box is absolutely fantastic. The Rhino Hi-Fi series is just blowing my mind since it's come out. I hope it continues. I don't know how long something like this continues. Uh, these great mastering engineers are all old. They're all very old. I don't think we talk about that enough. Maybe, I don't know if there's, but that's just the truth. I'm just being honest. Bernie, I mean, Bernie's old. Kevin Gray is old. Chris Bellman is old. The guys that we know as the greatest, they're old. Robert Ludwig is retired. Doug Sachs is passed. We don't have forever to get this kind of stuff. So I'm happy that we're cracking these things out just, as quickly as can be. And I'm glad you got guys like Matt Luthens who are learning from Kevin Gray. And like I said at the beginning of this video, Kevin Gray's system, Coherent itself, should be studied because it is what he has going on there is making these records. It just is. I going back and forth, getting this box, going back from Blue Notes, from other mastering engineers, stuff that's been done. We're getting to the point now where lots of the same titles are getting done 2 or 3 times for the original master tape by different guys. And what my brain hears every single time with the Kevin Gray master is more linear, more, there's just a more linear sound, less distortion, more detail, and that just has to come from the Class A gear. That's my interpretation of what I'm hearing, and when I put it to him, that's his explanation of what I hear. And I'm going to go with that because I was there. I watched LA Woman be mastered. There was no voodoo, there was no pixie dust being spread. It was very, we're going to cut this flat, we're going to bump this one volume level of this one track, maybe half a dB. This one's cut. This was a little bit hot. We're gonna take that down a half a dB. But it wasn't any there was no crazy wizardry involved. There was not. We're gonna bump up this, and this frequency and cut back this one. I mean, that did exist. It was very, very, very little futzing on LA Woman, and that leaves me again with, well, then that just leaves the system and the fact that he was doing it from the original master tape. Did I mention I held that in my hands? That was exciting. I'm not gonna lie, that was an experience. That was a good time. I should put another photo too. One of the other things I did is Bruce Botnick brought Kevin all of his records, like his first pressings of his personal copy as reference points, because the first couple albums they did together. But I also was there. I was checking out Bruce's. Ooh, this is Bruce Botnick's LA Woman Probo. That was cool too. I got a picture of that too. These are Bruce's records. This is awesome. But it was the experience of a lifetime. I'm super stoked. That was it was awesome, and the result is awesome. But I knew the result was going to be awesome when I was sitting in the mastering chair. I think it was something like this. Something along those lines. It was awesome, and yeah, this box is fantastic. I hope the Rhino Hi-Fi series goes on for a long time, and I hope the next generation of mastering engineers can live up to some of this past output, because we've had if you're watching this video in 2024 or whenever you're watching this is the absolute golden age for audiophiles. This is the pinnacle. I remember 20 years ago when I started buying audiophile records, maybe longer than that, early 2000s, we would get an audiophile record every couple of months. And it didn't matter what it was. Everybody was like, oh, let's buy this. It's the new guy playing trash cans, direct to disc. Let's get it, because we were starved for high quality records, because in the early 2000s they were making pretty crummy records if a mainstream artist was doing a record at all. But nowadays, oh my God, I do a new arrival video and it's just every week there's just a dozen great audiophile, killer sounding records. There's a lot of crap being made too, don't get me wrong. I've got issues with the industry in general. Maybe I'll do that in a future video, me complaining, but about the industry, because this past year I've got a lot of problems with you people. But there's a lot of great stuff going on right now, and yeah, here's hoping this is not kept to a few people. Here's hoping this is just like everybody everywhere gets a crack at these. Check us out online at theingroove.com. Until next time.